Invader Zim is back, baby! After Avatar: The Last Airbender, Invader Zim is my favorite series that Nickelodeon's ever done. And after Enter the Florpus, Invader Zim might just reclaim the top spot. I mean, that's probably just recency bias talk, and Avatar: The Last Airbender is freaking great, but Enter the Florpus is absolutely fantastic as well. It not only perfectly encapsulates everything that made the original series so great, except for Miss Bitters, and yes, I'm Mr. Bitters about that, but it takes everything that made it so beloved in the past and cranks it up to the most absurdest extreme. Enter the Florpus reaches heights of unbridled lunacy that the original one never comes close to, and if you're a fan of Invader Zim and haven't watched Enter the Florpus, you're doing yourself a great disservice. If you've never even seen Zim and for some reason decided to watch this video, Enter the Florpus doesn't exactly require prior knowledge to work, so you should also give it a watch to see why this franchise was so popular enough to get the Survivor movie in the first place. Regardless of your circumstances, if you haven't seen Enter the Florpus yet, I am going to spoil very important bits from it, so I highly advise you return to this video after watching it, because today I want to discuss 4 elements from Enter the Florpus that I absolutely adored. The 4 most interesting parts of Enter the Florpus. That was your spoiler warning. For everyone else, let's begin discussing the 4 pluses of the Florpus. Enter the Florpus is not Invader Zim's first return since the show's cancellation mid-production over a decade ago. Instead, Invader Zim first returned to us in the form of comic books, a still ongoing serialization of episodic misadventures akin to the kind we see animated on the series proper. I only read the first 3 volumes, I believe? However, that was enough for me to catch that the beginning of Enter the Florpus is essentially a panel-to-panel adaptation of the first chapter, back with only minor improvements in the Enter the Florpus version, like the Gazmat suit. This was a great decision for several reasons. The first being that it's a fitting tribute to anyone who read the comics, a bonus to them for being able to see something that they've read and presumably enjoyed seeing brought to life. It's a nice homage to the comic survival in general, but for those viewers who have read the comics, it makes the transition to the original material more satisfying. It's a nice way to further hit home the fact that we're getting new content. We start with something already familiar before transitioning over to truly new material, something of a gradual process to allow it to really sink in that we're witnessing the return of Invader Zim. That's not the only bonus comic readers get, as the prison featured in the film, Mu Ping 10, first appears in the Comic Zone issue 34. If you've been paying attention, I did not read that far into the comics, which brings me to the next reason why this was a genius move. Most people watching this, I'm assuming, have not read the Invader Zim comics. However, many fans of the movie will have reignited interest in Invader Zim due to Enter the Florpus, likely causing them to Google the series or watch videos about it that will inevitably lead them to the information that the opening minutes of the film were largely adapted from the comics. Not only bringing the comics to the forefront of their attention, but based on the opening minutes of the film, they'll be able to assess whether or not they'll enjoy the comics, making Enter the Florpus function as a great promotion for the comics in a very peripheral way. Since the only way the utilization of the comics is going to come to your attention is through people outside the project on the internet like myself telling you about it. It's only promoting the comics if you yourself enjoyed the film enough to seek out information about it. And if you already know about them, it's a neat little bonus to see your commitment to the series respected and Enter the Florpus while providing a nice transition to fresh material, which is genius. Side note, opening with the anime material works well to make sure that comic readers immediately know that it won't just be an adaptation of the comics, so that when they do follow that up with the comic material, there's no matter of concern that the events that we're about to embark on will be largely familiar to us. That's not the only thing the anime segment accomplishes, though. I'm going to try and gloss over this portion since the animation quality is something that will be immediately apparent to everybody watching the film. There are rare moments over the course of the film that feel like low-effort flash animation, but those are so sparse in comparison to the amount of great animation and color composition in the film. Make no mistake about it, Enter the Florpus is easily the best Invader Zim has ever looked by a galactic mile. And that was kind of the expectation, both because it's a movie and it's been almost 2 decades since production of the TV show ceased, but what I never expected was the myriad of different animation styles implemented throughout the movie. I knew of the aforementioned anime scene because I'm on social media and I follow the type of people that will immediately share content like that. And by the way, don't bother to follow me on Twitter because I never tweet anything. But once they reach the Florpus and we are constantly bombarded with vastly different and distinctive visual stylings of our cast of characters, I was in animation heaven. But the appeal of that is very obvious. What I instead want to point attention to is how well the anime opening foresells this. Of course, on its own, it plays off as a very funny joke about how revivals of old properties can tend to be vastly different from the original series, albeit they got it backwards in some Western media. Things usually switch to the opposite side of the spectrum, a la Teen Titans Go, Ben 10, and the Powerpuff Girls. Even without that context, it's a nice joke granting us insight into how Dip perceives the situation, with the epic, grandiose nature of an action anime, as well as featuring some nice jokes about how the heck is JoJo 17? But most interesting for me me is how it makes the four-piece alterations feel more cohesive in the story by immediately starting the story with a radically different art style than is associated with Invader Zim. That's why the first alteration is into the anime art style, because even with how bizarre some of the effects of the four-piece get, they still structured the story around with the idea of easing the viewer into the multiple shifting art styles that we get in the film's climax. Before we switch topics, I want to point out how much I love that they have a dedicated segment to parody and anime, yet the most anime thing in Enter the Floorpiss happens in the regular art style when Professor Membrane Kamehame sciences down a bunch of robots. If there was anything severely lacking in the original Invader Zim series, it was heart. And by severely lacking, I mean I don't think anyone ever requested that Invader Zim add sentimentality into its formula. It just never had it before, it never needed it, we all loved it, but now in Enter the Floorpiss, it features moments of sincere affection, and it works! Why does this work? How can Invader Zim implement sentimental moments without it just being tonally off-putting considering it's never been in the show's DNA prior? And, admittedly, it is a bit weird when Gaz is the one who starts this, but I do think that ultimately helps it. Because if there's any character in Invader Zim that you'd expect this the least from, it's Mrs. Left Out, but Gaz is a close second. Still, hearing her say she only told Sid because he knows he can take it, and that he's her brother, man, are still laced with her personality, which helps, since it doesn't feel sappy, just affectionate. It is relatively brief, quickly moving on to Dib's exaggerated movements and passing storytelling with Gaz's whatever face selling the humor. Another reason why I think it ends up working because it's not a drawn-out sequence. Neither is the other most notable example, Professor Membrane telling Dib he's always proud of him. This one is played even more straight as a dramatic sentimental moment, with no ill humor break afterward in the scene, and it's even presented dramatically, with the music stopping to focus on Membrane's word and closing the scene with the two separated and Dib screaming for his dad. Part of the reason this works is because we already got the brief moment with Gaz in the prison to introduce us into the world of an Invader Zim with heart, so it can exist naturally now within this world. But furthermore, this scene was properly built up throughout the film, with Dib's motivation of making his father proud by revealing the truth about extraterrestrial life being established early on. It was done so in the style we'd expect from Invader Zim, crammed with humor as he relates his plan with a clearly depressed Zim, but even if it had the comedic backbone to it, it still informed us of Dib's goal early on to help make their separation here effective. Speaking of that clearly depressed Zim, it's also worth knowing that those scenes with heart are reserved exclusively for Dib. When Zim's depressed over the TARDIS not coming to Earth, he's a depressed nacho cheese tower of an alien, or when he gets upset over the death of his robot army, it's played off entirely as a joke. One of the funniest jokes in the whole movie, I might add, but a joke nevertheless. His sadness is only ever played off for humor, which makes perfect use of Zim and Dib's duality, with Zim being clearly a villain protagonist while Dib is clearly the good guy. Finally, I've been discussing why this works mostly within the context of the movie itself, but no movie is viewed within a bubble, and that knowledge is why Enter the Floorpiss is able to get away with more sentimental moments despite the series never featuring them previously. Because for any returned fan who has the pre-existing impression of Invader Zim, Enter the Floorpiss isn't just a new Invader Zim movie, it's a reunion with a childhood favorite. We're already viewing this in a more sentimental mindset than we would with any other episode of the series, so because of that emotional element, they're able to slide in these moments more effectively. And for anyone who isn't watching this with that level of affection for the series past, they're probably newer viewers who don't have that strong of a connection with the original series, so these scenes won't come across as tonally un-Invader Zim-like. This is the reason I wanted to make the video. This ham joke is legitimately the most interesting aspect of the Invader Zim movie, and I don't feel like the community discourse has spent enough time analyzing its perfection, so I'm here to single-handedly rectify that. This ham is a joke that caters on several layers. The first layer is obviously that it's stupid. It's random that this piece of ham is some Chekhov's gun that amounts to basically nothing, including a narrator that only exists to explain its significance, of which it has none. It's one of those perfectly obtuse jokes that works because of how absurd it is on face value and how far they're willing to go with it. But that's not the only reason it's hilarious. The joke is also fantastic because it's an expert in pacing. Stopping the story entirely with the freeze frame is the definition of a pacebreaker. Halting the story entirely can already be an effective way to insert comedy, but what really makes it is how rapidly the story develops preceding the pacebreaker. In the first instance, after slowing things down to a crawl, once the story resumes, the ham is immediately thrusted down Dib's mouth. In the second instance, they add a bit more build-up to the ham with a classic He-Man and/or Lion-O pose with it before then immediately discarding it with a quickly placed slapstick moment. The way that ham plays with pacing, by halting it then quickly following up with a fast-paced slapstick bit, is absolutely genius. But the main reason why the ham joke deserves more credit is because it takes place within Enter the Floorpiss, which is one of the most tightly compacted things I've seen in terms of brick jokes and Chekhov's guns. Many of Go's potential Phase 2 plans alien proposals end up making an appearance of some sort again in the final encounter with Dib. Even Clembrain's containment pod is clearly visible during this portion of the story. The cute little pug dog that Girl launches into space comes back crashing down on Zim again at the end of the movie. Professor Membrane's sock story comes back into play when the socks pose an obstacle for the children on Peace Day. Though whatever that thing is that Zim steals from Dib at the end of the movie is visible in the background whenever in Dib's living room. This is a story that constantly rewards you for paying attention because many of the jokes here have a tendency to come back up later in the film. To me, this is what really sets the ham joke as an absolute highlight of the film, because out of all the gags in the film that come back into play later, this is the one they choose to spell out explicitly for the audience, and it's the one that would be the most obvious without the narration. Enter the Flopus knows it doesn't need to foreshadow any joke or commit its potential role to be effective, but it chooses to do so for one anyway, and it happens to be the one that would be the most immediately apparent due to the size of the ham and the ridiculous nature of its role in the plot, even without the time freeze and the narration spelling it out, and that is absolutely hilarious. It is a brilliant joke that alone justifies the existence of Enter the Flopus. And those were the 4 most interesting things about Enter the Flopus. And before anyone in the comments decides to bring it up, I'm already keenly aware that Miss Bitters was most likely not featured in the movie due to the unfortunate passing of Lucille Bliss, her voice actress. I can respect that decision, but I didn't want to depress people with that information, and I really wanted to make that Mr. Bitters pun. I also want to thank you all for watching this video, especially after I made that Mr. Bitters pun. I'm definitely going to be checking the YouTube analytics to see just how many people stopped watching this video after I made that pun. Anyway, see you, Space Invaders. Zims.